Na'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. We seek refuge in Allah from the accursed shaitan. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most merciful, especially merciful. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana. Glory be to you, O Allah. There is no knowledge for us except that which you teach us. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una. O Allah, teach us that which will be beneficial for us. Wazidna ilma, and increase us in knowledge. Warzuqna fahma, and grant us understanding. Ya muqallib al-qulub, O change of hearts. Thabbit qulubana ala dinik, keep our hearts firm on your deen. Allahumma ja'al a'malana khalisatan liwajhik. O Allah, grant our actions to be done sincerely for your sake. Wa la taj'al fiha hadda li ghayrik, and let there not be in them a portion for other than you. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Wasfiya Al-Talib, and I will be the facilitator for tonight. So before I hand over to our presenter for tonight's topic, I'm just going to introduce you to one of our upcoming programs, of our many programs that Muslims Connected hosts. So this one is a very exciting one. It's the Ramadan Goal Challenge. So you should be in one of our WhatsApp groups and you will get all of the information in there. If not, then please contact us so that you can be added to one of our WhatsApp groups. So this goal setting Ramadan challenge will come with a really beautiful Ramadan book, an ebook, where you'll be able to track your goals every single day, have space for journaling and reflection and du'as, and all of those lovely, beautiful personal development and spiritual growth aspects of Ramadan, and that will all enhance your Ramadan and add to it being a really beautiful transformational month, inshallah. So be sure to sign up for that. There will be separate WhatsApp groups for ladies and for men. And then we also have upcoming courses that are also on our social media. Please follow us on Instagram at Muslims_connected, and also on Facebook, just as Muslims Connected. So the upcoming webinar that we have is the nutrition in Ramadan, and this will be hosted or presented rather by a dietitian, Salama Solomon. That will be on the 20th of March at 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock South African time. And that will cover all of the nutritional, physical preparation that we need ahead of Ramadan. So please be sure to sign up for that and to attend that. It will be free. And yes, the Ramadan Goal Challenge, please check that out and sign up for that. So tonight's webinar is on Through the Child's Eyes. So it's called Through the Child's Eyes, and it's on the parent-child relationship and much more. And our presenter this evening is a clinical psychologist, and she is a lecturer at the University of the Western Cape. She's a part-time private practice. She's part-time in private practice and teaches both undergraduate and psychology students as well as clinical psychology master's students. She has a special interest in child mental health, developed from experience working with children and adolescents at the Red Cross Children's Hospital Division of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Child and adolescent mental health is also the focus of her PhD. So I welcome our presenter this evening, Zorina Noordien.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shukran Wasfiya for the warm welcome, and also to you and Masood for creating an online community space and allowing me to be a part of it. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to everyone joining who've made some time on your Sunday evening to attend this talk. I hope that you find that it is time well spent and you're able to take something away from it that's helpful and beneficial. So before I start my presentation, I'd like to say that this evening's talk, looking at the world through the eyes of the child, is not all-inclusive. But I focused on core and foundational areas that I've identified through my experiences in working with parents and children. So some of the areas I discussed may not be new to you, but I hope at the very least to share some different perspectives and new knowledge that you are able to use in thinking about children. I also want to acknowledge that I understand the nature of our contexts and communities are not always made up of typical nuclear families. So when I refer to mother or parents, I'm referring to any primary caregiver in the child's life. Also understanding that children come from single parent households and the role of the father in these households may sometimes be fulfilled by extended family or friends. In reference to that, it can be anyone who offers support and to the primary caregiver. So with that said, I will now start my presentation. Also just to say that there will be a space for questions after. Masood has shared the Google form with you, and after this talk, I will try and get through as many as I'm able to. So to start off with, whoops. Getting into the best place. To start off with, my interest in looking at the world through the eyes of the child developed through my work with children and families. And often through that work, I saw that my role as a therapist was to offer a different perspective and sometimes perspectives that weren't available to parents at the time. Bearing in mind, I worked with children and adolescents with more serious mental health issues, and parents being stressed or distressed, maybe in relation to the mental health, but also to their own life's context, sometimes struggled to change perspective and imagine what things must be like for the child. So that's the premise and for my interest in this area. So the outline of this evening's talk will focus essentially on the foundation, and which is the parent-child relationship. I will look at the first 1,000 days, which is a critical period of development for children. We'll also touch on attachment and parenting. I'll then move on to what it means to develop a nurturing and healthy relationship. The focus in this section would be on empathy. So like I said, this is not an all-inclusive topic, rather that what I've chosen based on the work that I've done. Then moving on, we'll look at reactive versus reflective parenting, and that's taking us beyond empathy. And finally ending off with, for me, is a critical part of this whole process and of the parent-child relationship, which is parental self-care. So with regards to the first 1,000 days, they consider to be, and I think the past 2 decades, a lot of focus has gone on this period because it's so critical in a child's development, both neurologically, physically, and emotionally. And this period is often strongly influenced by the child's environment. So the ideal environment for a child in the first 1,000 days is one that is warm and nurturing. The baby, if you imagine coming from the safety and the comfort of the womb into the world, can be very overwhelmed. So it's important that babies receive the kind of responsive parenting and care that is calm, where parents talk quietly and hold the baby when they need to. So this feeling of safety and being loved is vital for the baby's emotional and brain development. And as I go through this talk a little later, you'll see that the nature of the care and the quality of the care that the baby receives during this period often buffers against different challenges and emotional difficulties that might happen later on. What I mean by this is that this period of care allows the development of certain abilities, the development of ways of engaging, of the development of ways that they think about themselves in relationship with others, that stream throughout the baby's life. So what's important here is how parents plan response, and that helps the baby learn that mothers essentially provide nurturing care. But mothers are supportive if they are provided with a supportive environment. And it's with that in mind that the baby is able to learn and explore the world. So attachment forms an essential part of the parental and child bond. And I imagine many of you have heard and use the word attachment. And it actually signifies a deep emotional bond that forms between a child and a parent. And this bond is essential for healthy development. It's important that the child develops a secure bond with caregivers, because the secure bond will provide him a safe base from which to explore the world. With repeated and consistent attachment and interaction with caregivers, the child comes to trust that the world is a safe space and that they have the parents as a safety net to go back to when the world does become frightening for them. So what they learn with consistency is that I can navigate the world, I can go out in the world because there's someone there to support me if I find that I'm not able to. And so you'll find with children as they develop from babies and especially in the first few months of life, that they become better able to do this. So when the caregiver leaves, they might be upset, but if this baby has a secure attachment and has the experience of consistency, they'll understand and have the confidence that the caregiver will return. And when the caregiver does, this caregiver is often greeted with joy. So in this respect, it's like the child is joined to the carer by this invisible string that stretches across time and space. So the child knows that even though my mother's not here right now, I know she will come back. My past experience with her and what I've learned from my past is that she does eventually come back. And so essentially what starts here is the cycle of attachment. So the baby has a need, and this need can be hunger. He signals the needs through a cry or a smile. Caregiver responds to the need through eye contact, touch, feeding, and the baby needs are met, and so therefore relaxes. And this is the pattern that starts from the very, very early on, and the pattern that consistently repeats itself as time goes on. And so with this pattern, the parent becomes, or the mother becomes attuned to what the child's signal means. So you sometimes hear when mothers can identify that a certain cry means a baby's hungry, or a certain cry means they're tired. It is through that very early attachment relationship and tuning into the baby's signals that a mother's able to identify it when someone else maybe could not. So what's important also at this time is that the mother's able to engage and attune to the baby in the way she needs to understand what he's communicating to her. So crying is often the only means of recourse that the baby has available to communicate their feelings. What the parent or the mother needs in order to support this is a good support structure. So she needs the space to express and accept negative feelings, to normalize negative feelings in relation to adjusting to a new baby, but also to focus on positive feelings. So look at things that make her feel good and to pay attention to those two. The other thing is to take breaks, because no one can work at a job non-stop all the time. So support structure around the mother is really important so that she's able to tune into her baby's needs, but also to have realistic expectations. So essentially what parents are doing, especially in those early months, and I think throughout a child's life, is just doing the best they can. And it's important to remember to be kind to yourself regarding your limitations. So what do children get from the secure attachment relationship? So the feeling of safety and security. They learn that they can trust others. They know who they are and how they fit into the world. They believe they can make things happen. So it's a confidence and self-esteem that is born through this relationship. They're able to learn and grow optimally. They're able to learn right from wrong, social skills, how to recognize and manage feelings. They become independent as they grow older, and they're better able to cope with stress and frustration. So when I mentioned earlier how important this key area of development is because it helps set up a template of a baby of understanding themselves and understanding the world around them and understanding the people they're in relationships with. So this attachment relationship also fosters an internal sense of self that's able to manage feelings and able to respond to others in ways that are appropriate. What this also brings about is the gray versus the rosy lens. So this first experience allows the child to have a sense of self. So based on how they are responded to by the caregiver. They have a sense of how lovable they are, how they can make good things happen. What they learn about others is how much others love me and are concerned about my well-being. And what they learn about the world is what it's like and how I relate to it. So is it a scary place, or do I have a place to go back to when I am frightened and distressed? And as the child grows older, what they do is use these basic ideas for every relationship in life. So essentially, they're able to view the world either through gray or rosy lenses, depending on their early relationship with their parents. And what this leads to is this ongoing dance of attachment that continues from childhood to adulthood, where a person expresses a need, be that physical or emotional. The signals are different depending on the age and development. So a baby might cry, a 5-year-old might sulk, a teenager might sulk also, and an adult partner might express what their needs are. What happens then is that the carer and partner responds with warmth, empathy, and care. The person's needs are met and they relax. And so this template that is set up in very early life for babies often continues throughout their life. So what does this mean for parents, though, in terms of responding to the baby's needs? It requires that parents lean down to the child's development level and help them towards eventual adulthood. So understandably, the needs of a 6-month-old are very different to the needs of a 6-year-old and a 16-year-old. And it's important that parents bear in mind the developmental age of the child and respond in a way that's appropriate to that developmental level. So what young babies, I think, require is a more immediate response, where older children, maybe 5 or 6, can have a delayed response. What you're teaching older children is the ability to manage their feelings and to tolerate frustration so that they're better able to deal with the world around them, because immediate needs is not always realistically met in the world. So in every interaction, you're essentially doing a version of this, meeting a level of need based on ability and emotional development. And this talks to age-appropriate parenting. So while I'm not able this evening, because time would not allow it, to go through the developmental needs of children according to their age group, it's very important for parents to bear in mind when parenting what the developmentally appropriate need is for a certain age and to respond to that accordingly. So essentially, you adjust your parenting to what a child needs at a different time of their life, bearing in mind that children's chronological ages and emotional ages aren't always on par. And as a parent, if you've been tuned into your child, you'd have a certain level of awareness about your child's emotional age, what they'll be able to manage and what they need support with. But this may also be different for different children. I came across a quote once, and I haven't been able to track down where I found it, but essentially what they were saying is that a mother can have 8 children and each child will have a different mother. I think what they mean by that is that each child is born with an innate disposition, an innate personality, and that mothers also have a personality and have a way of engaging with the world and then respond to children a little differently depending on what that child needs. So to adjust and adapt your parenting according to that specific child. I imagine for those of you who are parents, you might have come to experience, I understand, that there's no set template, that it's not a one-size-fits-all model, and that often parenting needs to be adapted according to the child that you are dealing with in the moment. So what this does, it creates a space to learn your child's emotional responses, but to give the child a sense of being validated and heard, and understand the value of having someone who's able to attend to their emotional needs. So spending time with your child at this age then is critical to develop this nurturing relationship. And this happens through shared play or devoted time, depending on the child's age. That in my work with parents, I've often suggested 20 minutes a day per child. which can be challenging for some parents, and I've even moved it down to 10. What's more important, I think, here is just the nature of how busy life is to create a space that is child-focused. So if a child-focused and child-led, so if a child knows that for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes of the day, I have my mother or my parent or my caregiver's undivided attention, that does a lot to maintain the relationship, but also allow the child a space to express and share that isn't divided by other tasks. So this is sometimes challenging for parents because there's not enough time in the day. There are other demands from work or life or other children and families. But it's really essential to carve out and protect the space with your child so that they're able to, through the developmental period, have a space that is theirs, where they feel attuned to, attended to, and valued. So sometimes, and in the real world, moving beyond the theory of this, there's sometimes a mismatch between your own emotional volume and the emotional volume of the child. Emotional volume in the home is contagious. So it's also really important that parents set the emotional volume. So if you imagine raised volumes from parent and child, what happens in those situations is that parent and child are less able to hear each other. And if you find that volumes keep being raised, this can lead to miscommunication and misunderstanding. So parents are essentially the thermostats. And as thermostats, your job is to maintain and control the temperature of your home and not just measure it. So thermostats don't react or just read temperatures, they actually manage it. They do manage it. So essentially, if the emotional tone of your home is high, your job as a parent is to lower the tone. And you lower the tone by engaging in a calm, softer, more relaxed tone that you make contagious within your home. So if the tone is too high, your job is to make it lower by not perhaps raising your voice and by establishing a different way of doing things so that there is no misunderstanding and communication. So setting the tone is essentially the first strategy to help children grow and develop healthy bonds. Your job is to set and maintain the tone, and can change. Sometimes it's calm, playful, sometimes it's more firm and serious, but it is always loving, nurturing, and sensitive. So parents need to set this tone and be in control without being controlling. And sometimes what can be challenging is to maintain this tone despite the terrible tantrums or the teenage years. We'll speak a little bit later on how we can think about and strategies for maintaining tone. So in order to maintain your tone, you need to ensure that you are able to access a calm space within yourself. And what you need to do then is find ways of recognizing when your emotional volume is high and how to manage that better. So this can happen through close, loving relationships in which you share your feelings, finding ways to cool down or offload, ways of releasing stress safely and healthily, ways of finding relaxation and calm, being healthy and physically active, and ways of maintaining some of the fun you had in your life before you had children. Essentially, what this helps you with is that it helps you offer your child a sense of calm that you've been able to nurture in being able to do some of these things. So to develop a nurturing and healthy relationship, I focused on empathy. So empathy is a word many, again, are familiar with, but essentially, and I really like this quote, it refers to staying with your child in their emotions and experience it with them. So through empathy, you're conveying that you understand their emotions and that you're supporting them and comforting them over the stress they are feeling. Essentially, what you're doing is you helping them manage their feelings by recognizing and acknowledging it. So sometimes empathy is difficult to access, what's important to remember is that even though you're the one that created the situation through criticizing behavior or through making a poor choice, what essentially you need to do with empathy is join them in their distress. So empathy is feeling with someone. It's the ability to take someone else's perspective and staying out of judgment. So what this means is to recognize the emotion in someone else. So sometimes you can be in an emotion in a situation with your child that can evoke feelings with you. What empathy asks of you is that you connect with what the child is feeling, because it might be different to what you are feeling. What's also important is to communicate that emotion, because what you are doing is developing the child's emotional language, helping them develop the ability to recognize emotion and also to manage it. So I don't consider emotions to be good or bad. I rather think that some emotions are more comfortable and some are less comfortable than others. I think children especially just might struggle with the ones that are uncomfortable. So through empathy, what you're communicating to them is that your feeling of sadness or anger or hatred, I'm here and I recognize that feeling and it's okay, but how are we going to manage it in a way that's healthy? In order to do that, though, you need to connect with something inside of you that allows you to feel and recognize the emotion. As I said, the situation might not evoke the same emotional response in you as it does in your child. But when we're looking at the world through the child's eyes, what you need to be able to do and access is think about, what is this like for them? The situation might make me feel very upset, but what would it mean for them? And in connecting with that feeling of sadness that you imagine this child might be feeling and your own experience of sadness, you're better able to establish an empathic bond with your child. So it's not about giving a situation a silver lining. It's not necessarily about saying, oh no, I know you feel really terrible right now and you're really upset, but it's going to be okay. It's about saying that it's not okay now, and that's okay, I'm here with you. So situations are necessarily made better with an empathic response, but what it does is it strengthens and helps the parent-child relationship, because it gives the child the experience of being understood. It gives the child an experience of having their feelings validated and acknowledged. So what empathy is essentially is reflecting back thoughts, feelings, and wishes without asking questions. So example of empathic responses are, your face looks like you wish I would stop talking, you seem really angry, wow, you look really excited, and I wonder if you're disappointed. And so you'll see that there's no judgment in these responses. It's basically a reflection of what parents can see. And so often with children, depending on the age and developmental level, they might not be able to express with words what they are feeling, but you might have a sense of how they're feeling based on their behavior. So what empathy is not. And this is something in my experience that parents have struggled with. So children come and say, I have a problem. My friend at school was so mean to me today. I wanted to lend her orange crayon and she wouldn't. And so some parents might respond by saying, I'm going to write a note to your teacher and ask your teacher that this friend be kinder to you and that she lends you the orange crayon. Essentially, that's not empathy. Empathy is saying to your child, it feels like you were really sad that your friend wouldn't share with you, and not moving to fix it. So it's not advice, it's not fixing, it's not reassurance. Don't worry, I'll get you an orange pencil. I'll get you an orange crayon. It's not sympathy. Oh, shame, you couldn't use the orange pencil and you really wanted to. It is about acknowledging feeling and withholding judgment or withholding advice. And what you're teaching your child here is the lesson. And the lesson is often that it's okay to feel what you're feeling. Sorry, but I moved on to something. This is meant to be a different kind of lesson. So empathy is not a lesson in the sense that Well, she didn't share with you, and doesn't that teach you that you need to be better at sharing with someone else? That's the lesson in this sense. It's not a positive reframe. Oh, well, you didn't use orange, but you used red, and red looks much better anyway. It's not an explanation. It's not joining in their feelings or suggesting a better feeling, nor is it deny feelings. It's also not an opportunity for parents to release their own feelings. I can't believe you went through that. It makes me so angry. I really need to go to the teacher because this is not the first time it happens. What happens when you do that is that you're taking away from the child experience, and instead you're focusing on your own. It's not questioning. I don't understand why you feel so upset. It was only an orange crayon. It's not such a big deal. What happens then with the child with these responses is that they feel unvalidated, but also perhaps that their feelings are minimized and that their feelings are not okay. So some components of empathy, which may be hard, can be listening well. So what is required to listen empathically is to kind of quieten down the voice in your head with your responses and thoughts and feelings, and to just stay present with what the child is saying. And this is difficult because it's holding back a natural, almost instinctive parental response to make things better, to solve the problem and fix it so that my child doesn't have to sit with these difficult emotions. What it asks of you then is to manage your own emotional reactions so that you're able to sit with the child and able to sit with what they are feeling. And this is important because what it does, it helps the parent understand the child better, but it also helps the child feel understood. It shows that you are there, so not only physically present, but also emotionally attuned, and can prevent further difficulties later on. So essentially, and this is a repeat of what I've said, what you are teaching is for the child to identify their emotions and how to manage their feelings. So there's some hints for empathic engagement. Like I said, it's natural to want to rush to solve your child's problems, to dry their tears and make things better. Before you do that, wait. Wait and practice the pause. The pause is important for the child to experience that you're really listening and being there for them. So if instinctively you already know what you want to say before the child has finished their sentence, and if it elicits an emotional response for you when your child is distressed, what you need to do is practice a pause, like a moment of pause where you're able to separate your own feelings from that your child might be experiencing. So rushing into action make them feel like they can't manage their own feelings and that they should not show these feelings. So with the child and the crayon, which is a really simple example, what you could do instead is say, it's really sad for you when she wouldn't share with you. How do you think you could do things better? Or what do you think you could do to make things different tomorrow? The child might say, maybe if I shared my eraser with her, she will be more inclined to share her orange pencil with me. And so in that way, what you're teaching the child is to find their own solutions and ways to manage these difficult situations on their own. What you're saying is, I trust that you can make this decision and I'm here to support you. And I trust that you'll be able to find a way to resolve this. And this is an important skill for children to learn because it's something they take on with them into adolescence and adulthood. So with this, you ask your child if they want your help instead of offering it first. So how do you manage non-empathic responses? This is difficult because in the moment, because of a certain situation, it might trigger a really strong emotional response for you that you find difficult to pause from. What's essential during these times is almost a teamwork approach. So if you have a secret signal with the other parent or the other caregiver to say that you're not managing right now, you're not going to be able to engage empathically, can they please take over? It's important to keep stress levels low. And this is not always possible. And we'll talk later when we get to parental self-care on how to manage stress levels, but also not to keep it so low that you don't have a reaction. So not to monitor yourself so much that when a child comes to you distressed, it feels like you're cut off from recognizing the severity of their distress by being too kind of switched off from it. that you have someone you can offload with, whom you trust, who's able to listen to you empathically and won't judge or criticize or give advice. So your experience of being in an empathic relationship yourself will also highlight how important it is to engage with children empathically, just your sense of what it feels like to be really listened to. So examples for starting empathy statements are to come from a place of curiosity. I wonder if you're feeling like that because it sounds like perhaps you look really upset right now. I wonder what happened to make you feel this way. It seems like the look on your face tells me that. And these sentence starters can be used in most scenarios, because what they are doing is not making judgments or statements about what has happened, but rather coming from a place of curiosity to understand from the child's perspective how he's impacted and affected by what has happened to him. So empathy might not always work perfectly, especially if it's not been used in the past, but it won't do any harm. It can also be a little bit challenging when it's not been your child experience of how you've responded to them, and they could be very puzzled by your behavior. Essentially, what you can do in these situations is talk to your child. So communication. So as a parent saying, I recognize the way I managed things in the past wasn't working, so I'm going to try this way. Can you please work with me while I practice this way of working? Because I think it will help us have a closer relationship. So it can be difficult to master and may take practice. Getting the tone right is also important. So saying something empathically needs to be said in the right tone, because the change of tone can completely change how it's received. So practice with partners, friends, and family. Learn to recognize it in your own relationship, what it feels like for you to receive empathy and when someone's empathic towards you. And if you have not engaged in this way before and the child struggles to respond to you, don't be put off by this. What's important with this is persistence and consistency. Eventually, a child will recognize that my parent is doing things a little different. And I know the intention in doing things differently is to build a stronger and better relationship with me. So eventually they'll kind of get the hang of how you're doing things differently and might engage with you differently. So all you need to do is keep practicing so that they get used to it. We'll now move on to what it means like not to engage with children empathically. And that often results in reactive parenting. So the reactive parent is the one that doesn't pause, was not able to pause, that doesn't wait, but reacts immediately. And we're going to look at how reactive parenting is different from reflective parenting. So reactive parenting and parental reflective capacity is a concept that has been developed to look at moving beyond empathy. What this means is for the parent to have the ability to keep the child's mind in mind, to recognize, and that's why this evening is about looking at the world through the eyes, Charles, to recognize the child as a separate, autonomous being with their own thoughts, wishes, and needs. Reflective functioning then refers to your capacity to understand yourself in terms of your intentional emotional states and your feelings, thoughts, and needs, and the ability to separate that from the child. So what happens when we engage in reflective thinking is that we are less reactive as parents, because often and sometimes the reactivity is based on our own feelings, thoughts, desires, wishes, our past experiences of being parented, our reactions to what is happening, and not the child. What reflective parenting asks of you is to recognize that within yourself, that this reaction is mine, but it's not my child's. And to separate that from what belongs to you and what belongs to your child better enables you to think reflectively about your child, to engage reflectively in terms of what to do next, and engage empathically. Children who are allowed the space and are in a reflective parenting relationship often become more reflective themselves, because they understand that they that they also need to monitor their own feelings, and check in with themselves, and also manage their feelings differently. So reactive versus reflective parenting is often influenced by parents' own baggage that sometimes can affect the relationship with the child. So this baggage is past and present. It could be your own experiences of being parented. And what parents do, because it's relational, is parents can bring these experiences into the relationship with the past. I've said your own experiences of being parented, what was normal, acceptable in your family of origin are examples of these. And so parents sometimes find themselves responding and acting in ways they don't expect, because it's based on their own template of parenting, of being parented, and their experiences of their parents' reactions in the past that has now come into the present. So often this baggage from the past is influenced by your childhood history and the messages you gain. So what about yourself and your place in the world, what it means to be a man, woman, partner, parent, how to deal with life, how to manage emotions and stress, how to manage conflict, how to discipline and reward children, and also the messages in the family that are often unspoken about what it means to be a family. There are many other things that can be part of your baggage, but it's important, if you want to engage in reflective parenting, is to take the time, reflect, and assess what this might be for you, because it might be that the way you were taught to manage or not taught to manage emotions in your family of origin is not working with your child now. And so you'll have to find different ways of doing things. It may mean that the way you were disciplined in the past and how your parents understood your place as a child in the family might be a little different now, or your child might be asking for a different way of doing things. And if you don't recognize where your parenting is coming from, it's going to be more difficult for you to hold a reflective stance in and engage empathically with your child. So there's baggage from the past, but also baggage from the present. And that's just the everyday challenging, busy lives that we all lead, with stresses that could stress or distress you. It's work, finances, family, external family, society. The recent pandemic has put a strain on many families, but there may also be hot buttons, kind of hot button, which are your trigger points that get a very strong reaction from you, but actually don't originate from the current situation. So some of us might be aware of our hot buttons, and sometimes we are not. If you find that your emotional response is not fitting for what's happening, or is out of proportion to what is happening in the moment, that might be a signal that that's a hot button area for you. So once you recognize, and through insight and reflection and self-awareness, what your hot buttons are, what do you do with that? So we have the 3 R's, which is recognizing, regulating, and repairing it. The first point of call is looking out for your body's reaction. So there might be a physical reaction, perhaps to anxiety, to anger, and to recognize that when you're feeling that way, when your body is feeling that way, that this is the feeling that's associated with it. To regulate, which means to take a breath and calm down, and then to repair the relationship. So go to your child and say what you did wrong, and recognize and acknowledge how it made your child feel. So this is when you are reactive, and you haven't yet created a space of calm or a space of pause. You can always go back to the child and say, this is what was happening for me then. I'm sorry, it was not fair to react with you in this way. And this is what has caused it. You don't need to go into too much detail with the child, only to acknowledge that your reaction to the situation was out of sync with what had actually happened, and that you are aware of how it might have made them feel. So reflective parenting in essence is maintaining a stance of curiosity, and coming from a place of wonder. So I wonder why they're behaving this way. This isn't usually the way they react when something happens. And in the past, they've acted this way when something has happened of a certain nature. What this does is, though, it gives you a space to hold on to wonder and not come to a decision about the child's behavior without exploring it with the child first. And it also makes a child more responsive to engage in a conversation about what has happened for them. So if you say to your child, I wonder why you're behaving this way, they're more likely to engage with you than if you were to say, you're behaving this way because you're being very disrespectful and you always like this, and this is a very bad habit and it's not tolerated. Sometimes those responses can shut down communication and also not give you a sense of exactly what's going on for the child in that situation. So essentially what you're doing when you are engaging from parenting from a more reflective perspective is you reframing the behavior. So instead of saying won't, he can. Instead of thinking that the child won't do it, perhaps think that they can't and then wonder about why that may be. So holding your own thoughts, intentions, and feeling aside, you connect then with the view of the child and what their thinking could be. So based on what is happening, you could move two ways. So the reactive parent might be thinking he's just lazy, they want attention and they're rude. The reflective parent would be thinking, I wonder what this behavior is saying to me. I wonder what they're trying to communicate to me, and how can I help to better understand what they're communicating to me. Reactive parents is about rewards and punishment. Reflective parenting is about finding and removing barriers. So what has happened here and how can I understand and support it so that they don't behave this way in the future? Also, just to say that reflective parenting is not about not having boundaries and not having discipline, but it's more about maintaining communication and how we communicate thoughts and about what the child is feeling and going through and what the consequences are in a way that makes them feel included and thought about with their feelings validated. So through this experience of reflective parenting, children feel the child's experiences of being heard and the relationship is strengthened and supported. So I like this quote: if you see a child differently, you see a different child. So when children exhibit challenging behaviors, we can be stress detectors and find ways of removing barriers. Again, this is determined by the age and developmental level. So consider the stresses that your child might have, the unmet needs, the skills deficits, and find ways to help them and support them with this. So in order to engage in reflective parenting, to provide a secure attachment relationship and to provide a nurturing and loving relationship where you are able to set the tone and establish the volume, parental self-care is a critical part of it. In fact, I believe that without self-care, you aren't going to be able, your ability to do the other things are going to be compromised. Not you aren't going to be able, but your ability to do it will be compromised because you won't be able to access the calm that you need to lend your child. It's also important that we reframe self-care. Self-care is sometimes considered to be selfish. A parent goes out for a jog for an hour and feels judged or is judged. How can she go out and jog? She's got 2 small children at home. Shouldn't she be there taking care of them? Might judge themselves. How? I've got so much to do. I've got to cook. I've got to get ready for work. I've got to help with homework. I shouldn't really be running now because there's so much other things that are more important. Actually, there aren't many other things that are more important. That in taking care of yourself, you're essentially better able to take care of your child. So self-care is not self-indulgence. Instead, it's self-preservation. So you can't take care of your child, you can't engage empathically, create a reflective space or a pause if you haven't cared for yourself first. So you can't lend them your calm if you have no calm to draw on. And so it's important that as parents, you take care of yourselves to be as healthy and happy as possible. physically and mentally, to try and live a balanced life. These things can sometimes be challenging. To build resilience, connect to others, keep stress small, and seek professional help if needed. So some of these are challenging because I often in the past I've heard parents say, well, there's no time for this. There's so much other demands that take a priority that it's not possible. And what is a balanced life? I think it's important when considering parental self-care to be realistic and to be consistent. So you might not have 2 hours a day to spend on yourself to do the things that you enjoy doing, but do you have 30 minutes of the day? And actually, if you don't, you need to find 30 minutes of the day, because if you don't invest in your self-care for those 30 minutes, chances are that the ripple effect of the stress you're feeling and the calm you can't give will be felt in other areas of your life. So find your calm. To do this, you need to have a space where you can tune into and think about your needs and feelings rather than minimizing, denying, covering up, and just being really honest with yourself. What you're also doing here is that you are role modeling to your children what it means like to take care of yourself. And so hopefully inculcate in them this consistent time spent and acknowledgement of the importance of self-care. So it's important that you also recognize when you need support and the kind of support you need. Find ways to recognize, regulate, and manage your own emotions. In doing so, you're also teaching the child how to do it for themselves. If the child sees, well, mommy's gotten really angry and that is the way she manages it, the child might be more likely to engage in the same ways of doing things. So, well, when mommy gets really angry, I notice that she steps away for a few minutes and then comes back. And sometimes this isn't explicit. Sometimes you'll find with children that they might be mimicking or modeling you without it being spoken. Essentially, what you're teaching your child is healthy ways of managing feelings by managing your own feelings healthily. It also allows you to be more reflective and less reactive, to stay grounded and make better decisions. So often with reactive decisions, we can sometimes regret them later because we haven't taken the space to think them through. You're less likely to overreact. You're better attuned and empathic with your child. You can keep and nurture a sense of humor, which is really important because laughter increases chemicals in the brain and relieves stress. So that when we talk about setting the tone of your home, if you bring laughter and calm into your own space within yourself, that's also contagious and can spread to the tone in your home. So something, and I said it earlier, parents will often say there is no time. I don't have time to spend on me. I don't have time to breathe, as though breathing were a luxury. What the World Health Organization developed, and this was in light of COVID-19 and parenting tips, is the importance of practicing the pause. And this is a 1-minute relaxation activity. So it's called that, but I've tried it. It takes a little bit more than a minute, but no more than 5. And all it asks for is that 5 steps. So 5 steps before reacting, where you engage in pausing in a way that is deliberate and conscious. So find a comfortable seating position, close your eyes if that's comfortable, and then you kind of check in with yourself now. You're checking with your body, how you're thinking and feeling, and you ask yourself, what am I thinking? You notice your thoughts and feelings. You notice how your body feels. Are you holding stress anywhere in your body? Then you focus on your breathing. You can put your hand on your stomach to kind of center and ground yourself in the moment. And slowly, when you're ready to, you can come back to the room. And this doesn't need to take more than 5 minutes, although it's called the 1-minute relaxation activity. But what it is allowing you is a space of breathing where you can find your calm, where you can check in with yourself, and then come back to the room. After this practice, and the more often you do it, the easier it is. The more consistently you create this kind of space in the life, the more easier you're able to access this pause space. So at the end of it, it's about reflecting. Do I think or feel any differently now? And when you are ready, open your eyes. So people come back and say, well, I've tried breathing, I've sat there for a minute, but it doesn't work. It's important that it's not just your body that's relaxing, but also your mind, where you are in a space of withholding judgment, but just noticing, where you're in a space of only focusing on the breath and allowing all the racing thoughts to be put on hold just for a minute and focus on your breath. So with time, you'll find that this would be easier to do. It might be uncomfortable initially if it's something that you haven't practiced in the past, but it's just a way of pausing where you're physically removing yourself from a situation so you're able to better reflect or engage empathically as a parent. So the power of love, also very important. To have close friendships, relationships are essential because they're nurturing and sustaining. So having a very good support network does not mean quantity. If you have one person who can listen to you empathically, who is not judgmental and can provide you a secure base, that's really helpful. A space where you feel loved and supported means that it's easier for you to draw on those feelings of love and support and offer them to your child. It also models to your child what healthy and loving relationships look like, because you're worth it. So take time to think about things that help you distress yourself and take time for yourself. What it is you did in the past, maybe before parenting, that made you happy and relieve stress. Sometimes we can't always do exactly what we did then. Are there other things you can try? Are there ways of modifying what you did in the past so that you're able to access a calm space within yourself where you can build your capacity, because it's always going to be drawn from, and especially when you're feeling depleted with numerous demands. Important here is to make a commitment to yourself and to think about the barriers and how to overcome it. So often there are excuses, I can't do this because, and this is really important right now. It's important to have contingency plans so that when there are barriers, you have ways around it so that you're investing the time in yourself. It's also important to be really realistic and practical so it doesn't become something that's not doable and then doesn't get done. So in response again to there is no time, there is time, and it's just a matter of how much time do you have and what you want to use that time for. Just to say that it's important to establish this consistently with the understanding that spending time on yourself is not selfish or luxury. If anything, it's making you a better partner, colleague, and parent. It also means that you're better able to see the world through the child's eyes, because if you've allowed yourself the space to hold your own things in a separate place and better engage with them. So you could, in 5 minutes, for example, do a breathing exercise. In 15 minutes, take a power nap, or in 30 minutes, do a puzzle, go for a jog, join a parenting group, have a chat with a friend. So there are lots of things parents can do. It's about recognizing and acknowledging the importance of doing this so that you can be a better parent for your child. You can be a more empathic, engaged, attuned parent because you've engaged empathically and you've tuned into what you need. And that's the end. So I've just gone on the full hour. I see that there are some questions in the chat. We also have questions coming through with Google Forms, so just bear with me. I'll try and get through as many as possible this evening. So I know it was a mouthful. I feel like I went through it really fast. I could spend 2 more hours talking about different areas here, but I will try to, as best I can, answer the questions that you have shared. Okay, I'm just going to first look at the questions that have come up in the chat, and then I'll move to the Google Forms. Should I read it out loud? Salam, as a step parent who is going to lengths using these tools and attending these talks, what mechanisms are there for us? Do you see kids age 13 who have tried different therapists? Sorry, I can't see the rest of that message. So essentially, as a step parent, there might be different, it might be a different role to navigate. And what it talks about is the things we spoke about now. It's about the quality of the relationship and engaging empathically, so that the child feels like they are being heard and understood. So bearing in mind that children don't always give us the responses we want, or the responses we're trying to elicit. What you are, though, giving the child is the space and the recognition that their feelings are valid. So the relationship still is essential. The relationship is kind of the foundation and the key to working in homes where there are step siblings or step parents. So the mechanism still is essentially the same. It's about establishing the relationship and making sure that even though they're not responding to you in the way you like, that they want to be, that you are always attuned and empathic in your engagements with them. It is like a parent that hasn't been reflective or empathically engaging with the child, now starting new, and children are confused. If we do things consistently enough, the child will come to recognize that this is an adult I can trust. This is an adult who acknowledges and values my feelings, and in that sense, acknowledges and values me. So I hope that answered your question. I'm going to look at the rest of it and then move to the Google form. Okay, so I'm just reading through some of the questions. How to control the situation without being controlling. When being empathic, can you say that I'm sorry that your friend didn't share the crayon with you? Or I'm sorry that you experienced that today? Yes, that's an empathic response, because what you've recognized is that experience made your child feel sad, and so you're sitting with them in that sadness. And it's not fixing it for them. So a lot of these tips are great ways of dealing with adults who possess little emotional intelligence. They certainly are. So empathically engaging and coming from a reflective stance is not only within the parent-child relationship, but also in relationships with colleagues, with family members, with your partner. How does one use these tips with those adults with wisdom and not in a hurtful way? I think using these tips when you're coming from a place of empathy and not a place of judgment can be really helpful, because just as what we're saying is that the child will have an experience of not being judged, where their feelings are validated and they feel heard. So similarly, adults in this situation will feel the same way. You are not fixing, you are not judging, you are simply saying, I'm sitting here with you and with your feelings, and it's okay. How do you bring about change after 12 years of parenting, feeling lost now, feeling like we did everything wrong? So one of the reasons that I enjoy working with children and parents is that there are opportunities for repair and reparation. And the most important place, I think, to start here is recognizing that there are areas that require repair, and recognizing that if you want a different kind of relationship, you need to do things a little differently. So it's with that, like I said, with that empathic responses, you might have never responded to your child empathically in the past. What you can do now is say, this didn't work for us in the past, but we'd like to try something different. What the child hears is that you care about them, you've recognized that it hasn't worked, and that you are also working on doing things different, because parents aren't perfect, we are not infallible, we make mistakes. Sometimes in acknowledging our humanness and the fact that we do, we'll be giving our child the space to acknowledge their own. So the responses are coming in a different order. The order changes. I'm triggered by mess. How can I better cope with this? Okay, so your trigger by mess, I imagine, is you have a response and then you seek a certain reaction from your family around you to help you manage this. I think firstly you need to understand what that is about for you. So what is it? What is the feeling that's associated when you see mess? So creating a space for yourself reflective. So seeing mess means I'm feeling overwhelmed and my life's not going okay. But this is me and this is how I react to mess. What you could do though is put things in place, because tidying up is always a good skill, I think, for children, to put things in place to make things less messy, but to manage your own feelings around that, because your feelings might not be in proportion to what the people around you would feel in the same situation. So what's that trigger about? And can you manage your reaction when you do see mess? Can you be reflective instead of reactive then? And think, this is my response. And this isn't necessarily how they feel about it, but how can we work together so that we can manage this differently? So one last thing for the parent who has said that they're feeling lost and they did everything wrong, it's also important to know that there are support systems available, that if you feel like you're going to struggle to manage this on your own and you need some support or you need a different perspective, that asking for help is okay, that we can't always all cope on our own, and sometimes we need someone else to help us get through a difficult time or to get on track again. So I'm a young married female who's experienced lots of childhood trauma in various ways. My physical and emotional needs were not met. Today I'm extremely blank and neutral towards my parents. I of course want to better this for all our sake. How do I begin to fix this? Having a sit-down open conversation is unrealistic. Where do I start? So I think you'd start with you. I think my suggestion would be to find a space, if you haven't already, where you can be contained and supported as you self-reflect and develop awareness about your own emotional needs and your expression of it in the now. So you have an understanding that it's based on the past, but you have a space that is supportive enough to allow you to express and process what might be still unprocessed feelings about what's happened to you in your past. So I'd say that that's a good place to start. My son and daughter spent 3 months overseas with their grandparents in 2018. My son was 2.5 and my daughter 9 months old. At the time, it seemed like a good decision, but now it feels like I'm still facing the consequences of the decision my husband and I made. How did that hinder our development and development and relationship with us as parents? So 3 months is significant amount of time, but it seems as though they've spent more time with you. So I think it's important to bear in mind that in an ideal world, parents would have children that are with them all the time and able to be with them all the time, but that's not the reality for many of us. And so often you also get parents who work away and see their children once a month. What's important is the quality of your relationship. And so regardless of that 3 months spent away, what was the nature of your relationship outside of the 3 months? It is often, as I said, in infancy and early childhood that this gets set up. But 3 months in and of itself, if there was reparation or if there was later consistency and attunement and empathic engagement, shouldn't be too detrimental to your relationship and shouldn't have hindered it too much. If there are things showing itself up that you think is a result of that time period, there's still time to repair your relationship with your child and create the relationship that you do want. My child is very attached to me and my husband, and it becomes difficult to do anything. How can I change that or help her learn or be or play on her own? She's 1 year, 3 months. So it's important. I think when you say 1 year, 3 months, I think about COVID and what the world has been like and how we have been more reclusive and less socially engaged than we might have before COVID. So I think it's important to consider context, to slowly follow your child's pace and allow more time for her to establish her independence. So at 1 year and 3 months, is it developmentally appropriate to be attached? It may be, but it's also a space where you can help her help her recognize that mommy and daddy will always be there, but it's okay if you do that. It's also important, though, that you do this according to your child's level of ability so that it's not too abrupt. What that will mean, it will create more anxiety. So do it in a way where you spend short periods away from your child, perhaps in a different room. And then you extend that time period. So it could be 5 minutes. And so when she does get distressed, that you go back to her and you contain her and you hold her, and she comes to learn that even if mom is away, I know she'll eventually come. Because the hope is that then she'll develop this internal way of managing her own feelings based on how you've managed to contain and nurture and make her feel safe. Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions. We have a 2-year-old and 1-year-old grandson. When the one crawls, starts bagging, we give them attention. The 2-year-old starts crawling and makes conversation, imitating the 1-year-old. Do we ignore the 2-year-old when he tries to regress, or should we give him attention? So what is he? So it's very intimidating and overwhelming for a 2-year-old who has no control of the world when something new happens that takes away what previously belonged to them. And it seems to me what he's telling you with his behavior is that I'm also here. Please pay attention to me. And maybe if I act like a baby, I'll have a better chance of you paying attention to me. So my suggestion would be to give him the attention he needs, because that might not last for a long time. All he needs to know is that he's still important. And if he does get the attention he needs, eventually he will move on, because developmentally he's going to want to explore the world more than likely. If he doesn't get the attention he needs, though, what it might mean is that he try to engage in different behaviors similarly to the 1-year-old, because that's what gets the 1-year-old attention. Okay, I hope that helped. I'm a calm mother, but kids change once they start school. They see other kids and learn new behaviors. They become different and in some cases rebellious, demanding, and they make their mother feel as though they're not good enough. How can we explain? We can explain to kids, but today's kids are different. How can we overcome the difficulty of kids in relation to today and what they're exposed to in today's times? So that's a really good question, and it has come up before in other parenting experiences I've had with parents of children who find the same thing. The times are different, they're picking up all these things at school. Essentially, if we think about attachment parenting and the security of that relationship, that has cut across different geographical locations, different socioeconomic stations, different decades. The importance here is the quality of relationship, and children, for parents to set the tone and maintain the tone and maintain the boundary. It happens easier if children feel a connectedness and nurtured in the parental relationship. So they might become teenagers and move away to their peers. They might engage in certain behaviors. But essentially what you're doing from early on in your attachment relationship with them is you're setting up a template. Remember, you are the safe, secure space. And even though they venture off and they don't agree with you and they think you're not good enough, if the relationship is secure enough, what happens is that they will eventually come back. So you need to trust that you've put enough in place so that your child understands what's important. So the world might be different, but children need the same things, from the kids to what children needed 50 years ago and 100 years ago. They need a supportive, nurturing relationship, regardless of time, of the time they're living. How can a parent remain calm or patient during tantrums, or when my baby is sick and my baby is 1 year, 3 months? So being calm and patient during tantrums can be very challenging. And that's where you need to practice the pause and engage with reflective space. So it's difficult in the moment to think about it if you haven't engaged with self-reflection before. So if you aren't aware of what your own triggers are and your own reactions are, and think about how to manage it in a way that doesn't interfere with what your child needs from you. So remember, I said that what we do is we acknowledge as parents that when they throw a tantrum, it's really upsetting for me. So a reactive parent would be, and we've seen this and we've had experience with it maybe, and you have a child in the shopping mall throwing a tantrum in the aisle. A reactive parent would be thinking, this is so upsetting. I still need to get groceries and go home and cook, and this is so embarrassing, and all the people are looking at me. I feel so ashamed. They must be thinking I'm a terrible parent. A reactive parent would be thinking from this perspective and then react in a certain way by maybe giving the child what they want or tugging them harshly. And that's because they're thinking about their own responses to the child's behavior. A reflective parent is able to recognize that they don't not feel those things. So I'm feeling very embarrassed. There's so much things I still have to do. I can't believe they're doing this to me now. But those are my feelings. I wonder why they're behaving the way they are. Well, it has been a long day and they didn't have their afternoon nap. And I know that when they don't have their afternoon nap, that this can sometimes leave them feeling unsettled. And this is probably what's happening right now. So they need me to help calm them down. So that's how we manage calm in the moments, but it's only through introspection and self-awareness that we are able to be more reflective parents and then manage the situation a little differently. So that parent will then recognize that this child needs this from me in this moment because and that's what the behavior is trying to tell me. I think that is all we have time for this evening. I am sorry that I haven't been able to get through all the questions. And I think maybe at this point I can hand back over to the host.
Shukran so much. We just really like to thank you for the bottom of our hearts for taking your time and your expertise and sharing it with us. We've already gotten a lot of positive feedback that it was very beneficial and helpful. And I love all the practical examples as well. And we hope that all the parents watching will implement what we've learned from you today, and we hope to see you in many more upcoming sessions. So Shukran so much. And then before we end, I'd just like to remind our audience about our upcoming webinar on nutrition in Ramadan on the 20th of March at 7 till 8 o'clock South African time. and that will be by a dietitian, so be sure to tune into that. And then we also have our Ramadan goal setting group that's going to be running during Ramadan, so please do check that out and sign up for that. And then also we actually have Quran teachers online, female online Quran teachers, so I teach Quran online myself, and we also have other female online Quran teachers. And with Ramadan coming up, it really is the perfect time to brush up on your tajweed and your recitation, as well as your memorization and revision. So do get in touch with us with regards to that, and follow us on our social media on Instagram and Facebook. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.